everybody, I'm Daniel G. Garza, and welcome to another episode of Put It Together live stream. It is Saturday, February 5th, and I have a really cool guest with me today, and I'll tell you more about him. Just a second. First of all, I want to welcome everybody who's watching us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter. Thank you for joining us. If you mind, will you share that on your page so that other folks can watch along with you? If you're watching us on YouTube, we do me a favor, scroll down, hit that subscribe button and the notification bell. It'll let you know when new shows come up on the air. And for everybody who's been following us, you know that we have Christian and Daniel on Wednesdays, Card Devo on Fridays, and Put It Together on Saturdays. So, and if you're watching this live tonight at 5 o'clock, I have a special episode, two shows today this Saturday. So make sure that you come back at 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time for that show. On today's show, today's guest, I have wanted to have him on the show several times, and I'm going to, I like to throw myself out there when it's my fault. For some reason, I kept messing up the times and the emails, and we just could not get coordinated, but it worked today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about, from Promo Homo TV, Nicholas Snow. Nicholas Snow is an actor, author, singer, songwriter, and television host and creator of Promo Homo TV, an online, globally accessible free television network dedicated to connecting the circuitry of humanity by creating programming for LGBTQ plus everyone. For decades, Snow has described himself as a multimedia entertainment activist dedicated to expressing my creativity in a way that makes a difference. The series of lineup for the Promo Homo TV 2021 fall season premiered September 14th of last year, and it includes shows. I'm going to give you a quick lineup: Live Positive, Notes from Hollywood, Ordinary, we're going to correct that in a minute. Higher Powered, Hot in Palm Springs, the Nicholas Snow Show. And if you want more information, we'll put the link in just a minute, but it's Promo Homo TV, and you can go check them out for more information. So for now, I'm going to bring on the air Nicholas. Hello, sir.
Hello, Daniel. Thank you for having me on. Great to see you virtually.
I know. How are you? How you been?
I'm great. And we did have some bumps in the road getting together for this broadcast, but the timing is always perfect when things happen because my next really aggressive season of programming kicks off Monday, February 7th.
Nice. So we're just in time. Yeah, telling the audience. So I'm gonna tell on myself because I don't mind. But I sent him an email once, and we had set up the schedule. And then for some reason, when I sent him the email, I either put the wrong time or the wrong date, and then I was ready to go, and then I looked at the email. I'm like, dang it, I sent him the wrong info, and but it was all on me. So, but I'm glad it worked out, and you're getting a hold
Hey,
of
I've done stuff like that too as with guests, so it's fine. We're human.
Yeah, it's I realized after all these years, like if other folks like you, like producers, directors, with one man shows, like some of those things just bound to happen. And at a certain point, you just go, "Oh well, it happened,"
Don't sweat the small stuff.
right? Uh, but you have a really cool story, so I'm going to stop talking and I'm just going to start off. Nicholas Snow, tell us how you put it together.
I will, but I first want to acknowledge you because we have a lot of similar things that we do in our life. I'm also living with HIV, and I'm out about that because I think that telling that truth is very important and makes a difference. And I know that you do that as well. I'm a health advocate across the board for many different things, and I know that you do that as well. I'm fiercely out of the closet. I know that you are as well. And I think that it's really important for everybody to connect with, own, honor, and express their truth. And you're an embodiment of that. So I want to acknowledge you for who you are in the world.
Well, thank you. I
And
appreciate
um, in the variety of work that I do, my if I had to say my ultimate goal that fits with others is that people that I reach learn to um, discover their dreams and give themselves permission to pursue them. And if I had to, I guess one of the things that I want to say, first of all, is that my life, the trajectory of my life was dramatically altered because of the appearance of the HIV and AIDS epidemic in the world in the early 80s. Now, I personally did not become HIV positive until 2007, which is another story, and I wrote the book about it. We'll come back to that. But in the early 80s, my best friend from high school had committed suicide. My great grandmother, at a ripe old age, died. And I was living away from my conservative Republican upbringing and coming to know who I was. I was involved with the coming out process. And I was also studying communications at Arizona State University. And then the AIDS epidemic showed up,
Wow.
and people that I knew and loved were dying. And one of the most valuable lessons that I learned at that time, especially being in a academic environment around the power of communication, was that the most powerful thing that I had was my story, my truth. The most powerful thing I could contribute was my understanding into a world of darkness around particular issues. So I became an activist and never stopped. And you could say that I surrendered my heterosexual privilege because I didn't have to come out. Many people didn't. Many people don't now. But I surrendered my heterosexual privilege, and I came out, and I just never stopped.
Wow.
Because I happen to have just mentioned privilege, I would like to acknowledge a huge insight I've had in recent years about a better understanding of what white privilege is. I think that people with white privilege who are unaware and unenlightened and uneducated and perhaps even bigoted don't know they have it. But in retrospect, when I've looked deeply at my own relationship to racism and especially in the face of the Black Lives Matter movement, and of course, the immigration issue has been a lot about brown lives. I've looked more deeply at the socioeconomic barriers that exist and the things that I've taken for granted. And the reason I mentioned that right after talking about having surrendered heterosexual privilege in the early 80s is that I always equated a lot of similarities between the Black civil rights movement and the LGBTQ civil rights movement. And with my new frame of looking at things, I can look back at that time in my life and I can see that the Black and brown people and the trans people that were on the front lines at that time were taking so much more risk than I was and had so much more to lose than I did. And that they, if we're all in solidarity in the Pride Parade, there's strength in numbers and there's power in that experience. But when we step off that Pride Parade route, I was stepping into a world that was built for white men. So I get emotional when I think about this because our own personal stories are very powerful and we do make sacrifices, but I'm glad that I'm looking more deeply at other people's experiences and what they've been through, what they've gone through.
Yep.
So that's one of my current life lessons that I didn't even really know I was going to talk about in juxtaposition to that time in my life.
That's really
Um,
interesting. First of all, I commend you for finding that, because a lot of people don't come to the realization that the word privilege and what it really means. Over the last several years, it's gotten tossed around a lot, and people use it, and we use it to argue, and we use it to assimilate. Uh, and I'll just give you this quick story on that. I did a training last year for HIV education for the Latino communities in the States. And I found out, which I was not aware of, that there was a spectrum of privilege in the Latino community, because I am a citizen, I speak both languages, I'm educated, I have a platform, etc., different things. I'm documented. And then there was a spectrum that I was in the same classrooms with, who did not have all of these things available to them. And I always thought, why can I not connect to some of the Latino people in Orange County? What am I missing? And in that class, I found out, well, within the community, within the Latino community, there is a spectrum of privilege that I wasn't aware of. So lack of better words, I woke up to the fact, I was like, wait a minute, I need to step back a little bit and really see what's affecting my community as a whole. And you brought it up earlier, like HIV community, the people of color community. Like, there's all these things that we sometimes don't notice because we're in the bubble. And you're right, within the parades or within the clubs or in organizations that we go to, we're all for the same fight. But the moment that meeting, that reunion, that parade is over, we all go back to our quarters and there's no communication. So it's really interesting a lot of things you're bringing up. I appreciate that.
well, sure. And then there, just to bring it more specifically, there's the the white gay man that can afford a gym membership and vacations, that's figuring out, which circuit party to get to go to, and who might be in that parade. And then there's the young black trans woman who just got thrown out of her home, is unsheltered, and has a completely different reality.
Yeah.
And both of those people could have just been in the same pride parade.
There is this whole culture within the gay community or the LGBT plus community, that we tend to want to stay in our. I mean, we want to be safe. We most of us have been through traumatic situations that were brought on by our sexuality. So we find it's a comfort zone. I mean, what else? It's just a comfort zone. You find your group, your tribe, your family, whatever you want to call it, and you stay there. And it's really hard to look across and first of all, put yourself in the place of somebody else's journey, obviously, but to figure out what their troubles are, what their blockages are. Yeah, it's it. Um, let's move forward, because how that you're like me, and when you talked about that in the beginning, like, we have a lot of similarities, and I'm going to guess that also your professional and your personal life get blurred sometimes. How does what you've learned and you just talked about affect your professional, or vice versa?
Well, interesting. We're talking about privilege, we're talking about race, we're talking about class. Well, one of the things I'd like to talk about also is mental health. So, I have in February this month, I will turn 21 years sober. And I've done a lot of work in 12-step environments. I've gone through. I've worked with therapists throughout my life. I think as my first therapy session was in college, and I have struggled with issues around food, around sex, around money, around so many different things. And one of the reasons that I was really ineffective in many ways in my early activism was because I had a complete absence of self esteem. and I had this desperation to prove myself and to prove that it was okay that I had taken up oxygen on the planet. That's how I felt about myself in my own upbringing. And when I come to the table with that sort of going on inside me, with this new awareness of the power of my voice in the face of people dying, I, in my early activism, had this desperation that, maybe I needed to go out like a supernova because I had a short span of time to prove that I was okay and to make a difference. And thankfully, I've been around long enough to through a lot of hard work, develop what I describe as authentic, sustainable self-esteem. But that comes from recognizing my own powerlessness. And I'd like to say that I don't think that there is anything that makes someone more powerful than when they realize that the power doesn't come from them.
Yeah.
So I believe I'm living a very powerful life, but the power doesn't come from me. I recently, in the last few years, I'm maintaining around a 50 to 60 pound weight loss. I did that without dieting, with very little exercise. No foods were bad or wrong, and no surgery. I acknowledged that I was powerless to achieve this on my own. So I worked with my issues around food with a registered dietitian, and I still do. I work more deeply on my anxieties and my fears in a therapeutic situation. So I don't have to eat over them. So I don't have to act out sexually over them. So whatever. Um, so in my personal life, I've done a lot of work, and I believe that that's what allows me to have the depth of conversations that I have in my work as a journalist. One of my biggest challenges, I have to say, is and I'm just being extremely honest, is that my default is to choose isolation, even now. And I had been doing a lot of work in therapy to create the muscles to really go out in the real world and be with other human beings. And uh, in a step toward that direction, and I think I've done this 2 or 3 times with notice before the pandemic, I unfriended 5,000 people on Facebook. I let
Wow.
I let them know in advance I was going to stop using my personal profile on Facebook. I was going to move everything to my public page. And and the reason for doing that is I was thinking, okay, if my only way of maintaining a connection with someone is through social media, then it's not really a real connection. I don't believe that is true, because some of the most deeply connected and supportive people that I have in my life are people I've never met in person. They're people I know through social media. So I kind of threw the baby out with the bathwater, as they say. Then the pandemic happened. Well, I'm really kind of glad that happened. I'm not glad the pandemic happened at all, but I'm glad that I wasn't engaged in this frenetic, frenzied, fearful, angst-filled conversation about the pandemic with those 5,000 people,
Yeah, I understand that.
which is what I would have been doing at home on my sofa. So it was actually during the pandemic when I really advanced Promo Homo TV into a full-fledged online broadcast network with high production values, multiple series, and a growing worldwide audience. And I was glad during the recent period of time when the community opened up again and I could go out, because one of the things I really became known for was my really effective long form live broadcast of real world events. And I've captured a lot of history doing that. And I really enjoyed doing that. But one of the things I'm really aware of when I go out with real people
Mhm.
is that I basically only do it with a very small handful of friends in a truly social situation, or when I'm wearing my media hat.
Gotcha.
If I have my media hat on, I'm fearless. I can talk to anyone about anything. I've interviewed movie stars. I've been on red carpets. I've been on live television. I've produced live television. I've performed as an actor. When I have those sorts of professional hats on, I'm fearless. But when it's just me,
Yeah,
it's not so much that I'm afraid, really. I'm kind of the person that's going to stay in the corner,
gotcha.
and I realize that to someone else that knows this really big public Nicholas Snow, if I'm standing off in the corner, that they're not going to think, oh, he's shy, he's afraid to be here, he has social anxiety. They're going to think, oh, he's too important to talk to me. He's too full of himself to talk to me. So, in a way, my platform could make me seem unapproachable. Uh, but the fact is that I still deal with fear and social anxiety. And I think that that's been exacerbated a bit by the pandemic.
Well,
So,
let me get back because there's a lot of stuff that, and actually, you mentioned it like there's a lot of things in common, but there's a lot more in common than meets the eye. Because you were talking about sobriety, I'm about to hit 15 years clean and sober. This
15.
15 in June, yeah. So I'm
Oh,
counting.
good for you.
I'm waiting for that quinceañera to come along because I'm
You
trying
know,
to.
when I turned 16, it was the first time I really ever had a big AA birthday party, and I called it my Sweet 16 party.
See, and I'll be doing
And
the Mexican version. So yeah.
well, and now I'm about to turn 21, so I'll be old enough to drink. But I'm not going to.
And then you touched on something that it's really interesting because most people would not assume because I suffer from anxiety and uh, I'm on the lower spectrum of agoraphobia, and most folks would not even assume that because I'm like you say, if I'm Daniel G. Garza, interviewer or advocate or public speaker, comic, all those things. Like the moment I'm on, and there's no stopping. Like I got this, but they don't see like the 20 minutes before I left the house that I was in full panic mode, uh, just trying to. I don't know if this happens to anybody out there watching. By the way, for anybody watching, if you want to ask some questions or comments, please do so. But like 20 minutes before I leave the house, the panic sets in that I need to clean the fridge right before I walk the door because right now this is the only time that I can do it. And then I'm happy if I throw one thing away and I'm like, okay, now I can walk out the door. But then once on stage, it's like, hi, welcome. And people are like, I would not believe that you have anxiety or any kind of stress. I'm like, yeah, but that's the sign of a professional. Let me ask you this as we talk about it. Do you remember if you had a panic attack the first time that happened and how you got through it?
Well, I think that anxiety and panic attacks are very different things, and I I don't have that level of anxiety, um, and I think I've only had one panic attack in my life, and it was in the early part of the pandemic when I thought I had COVID and I was imagining all sorts of symptoms, and I got weird feedback from a nurse advice line and um, I think I've only had one panic attack. It was not fun. Um, but I know it's weird. I've learned to just say, if I'm at a party and I'm not there as a journalist and I happen to have a conversation with, I might say something like, I actually have social anxiety, and when I come here, I'm taking contrary action to work to authentically connect with other human beings. Maybe that's TMI for whoever I said that to, but I frankly think that being honest and open and talking about my fears makes it much more easy. to be in the world,
Right.
I wanted to just very briefly run through some milestones that happened in my life from those really important formative years in at Arizona State University in the early 80s. So I ended up being a major activist in the state of Arizona, and my final semester at ASU, I got 6 credit hours for doing public speaking on what we knew at the time about HIV and AIDS, and I created a lesbian and gay community speakers bureau, and I got 6 credit hours in the Department of Public Programs at ASU to do that in my final semester of college in 1985 when I graduated. I was on the 5.5-year plan in college. And then I ended up with some other jobs in different places and outside the state. I ended up back in Arizona. And for a period of months, I had a executive director position with a small community organization. I wasn't very good at it, and I didn't last in that position. But then I thought I wanted to follow my dreams, and I wanted to honor my dreams and my life force. So I moved to LA to pursue acting. And around that time, I did a really powerful personal growth workshop called The Experience. It was formerly known as the Advocate Experience. And I benefit from that to this day. And that connected me to become one of the only full-time paid staff people, along with thousands of volunteers and many other people. Just because I happened to be paid doesn't mean I was any more important to the event on the first ever National Coming Out Day in 1988.
Oh, wow.
And I was instrumental, along with thousands of other people, to bring that about. And the first year that was featured on the Oprah Winfrey Show, not me, but the founders of National Coming Out Day, the late Rob Eichberg and the late Gene O'Leary. And, Oprah at the time, I think her daily viewership was over 20 million people. So in 1988, millions of people, tens of millions of people learned about National Coming Out Day, and I was there at the beginning. And then I became a board member of the Alliance for Gay and Lesbian Artists in the Entertainment Industry, AGLA, which it didn't evolve into GLAAD, but you could say, I believe you could say powerfully that it created the cultural context in which GLAAD was born.
Okay.
So I was involved with that. And as in 1990, because I was also a journalist and other things, I decided to create a column kind of as a PR tool for GLAAD called Notes from Hollywood. And Notes from Hollywood would examine the relationship between the entertainment industry and the LGBTQ civil rights movement, thereby positively impacting the movement itself. So I started this column called Notes from Hollywood, and I offered it free to LGBT publications, and it was published as far away as Australia.
Oh, wow.
It was published in New York City. It was published in other places. And around 1990, I got a day job at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. I was working as a temp. Then I went to San Francisco for Pride, and I ended up falling in love with someone, and I moved up there for like 6 or 7 or 8 months and ended up coming back to LA, where I got a permanent job at Cedars-Sinai Medical Center. And while I was there, a friend of mine, I'm not going to say his name on camera just because I don't believe he wants to have a social media presence right now. That's the only reason I'm not acknowledging him publicly for his role in my life. But he started a public access TV show in the LA area. And that gave me the idea of starting my own public access TV show. So in 1993, I did create a public access TV show called Tinseltown's Queer, which I described as a Queen's version of Larry King.
Okay.
The first episode was recorded on April 28th, 1983, which was 3 days after the March on Washington that year, which I had attended. The March on Washington that year just happened to take place on my birthday. So in 1993, that would have been my 31st birthday. And then 3 days later, I recorded the first broadcast of Tinseltown's Queer, which had its first airing probably within 2 months because of the time it took to book. And for 7 years, I produced, up to 7 years, I produced most of the rest of the 90s, I produced this show. The final year, it evolved into the Nicholas Snow Show. Because of my visibility in the media in a variety of ways in the early 90s, Matt Scalarud and Fabrice Tessendo reached out to me. They were the founders of gaywired.com. They're still around today. Their company is Pink Media. They've become great friends of mine. I continue to collaborate with them to this day. But they reached out to me to be sort of a media personality for their website. And I worked with them as a bridge to the internet. And in episodes of Tinseltown's Queer, we did the first ever live internet television simulchats. So they brought a computer into a live public access studio. The computer was hooked up to a chat room via a modem. Anyone that happened to be in our viewing audience that had access to that particular platform could interact with us. And it was also at the same time where we could have viewer call-in. So this was happening in the 90s.
Wow.
And the end of the 90s, their company was growing. I left Cedars-Sinai. I began to work with their company that evolved and got bigger during the huge growth of .coms in the early 2000s. I was an executive with them. I was the vice president of content development for G Society. G Society was the name of the larger company that had investment capital. Then the .bomb happened and I was laid off. Matt helped me create notesfromhollywood.com, the website.
Okay.
And I thought, I'll create Notes from Hollywood as a multimedia entertainment brand to exist on radio, on television, in print, and online. And I chose Palm Springs as my anchor market. And I moved out here in the early 2000s. And sure enough, I participated regularly on radio here. Notes from Hollywood, the column was published here. I was close enough to Hollywood to still report about Hollywood. The website notesfromhollywood.com grew significantly. And for a period of time, it was in the top 100,000 websites in the world. I was, one of the things I've been accused of is being only interested in my own fame and fortune, and basically exploiting the LGBTQ civil rights movement, or later on my HIV status, exploiting all of these things for my own fame and fortune. And you could probably make a case for that. If you looked at little snippets of my life, you could tell that narrative about me. But I think if you look more deeply and factually at my whole life, is that I haven't ever been looking for causes to support my career. I've been looking for careers that will allow me to stay passionate to my cause.
Yep.
And so I ended up, because of Notes from Hollywood, the website, getting invited to cover a lot of film festivals. And one of the film festivals that I got invited to cover was the Bangkok International Film Festival. And I covered it in 2004, 2005, and 2006. And in 2005 and in 2006, I was asked to moderate the major press conferences with Hollywood stars that were attending the press conference and were appearing in front of the world's media that was gathered for the press conference. So over the course of the 2 years, some of the press conferences I moderated were with Oliver Stone. I moderated a press conference for the Bangkok premiere of Phantom of the Opera, featuring Joel Schumacher, Miranda Richardson, and Gerard Butler. And then halfway through that press conference, Miranda Richardson and Gerard Butler left the stage. Michael Douglas joined us as part of the tribute to Joel Schumacher because Michael Douglas worked closely with Joel Schumacher. Willem Dafoe, and others, so I kind of stepped into, I stepped out of a plane and onto a red carpet in my Thailand experience. So in 2006, I decided to base myself there, and I did. When I got invited back to the film festival in 2006, I put everything in storage. I researched how I could become a foreign correspondent. And even though I had a round trip ticket, I had no intention of returning. And I went and I based myself in Thailand, or I was there for 5.5 years, where incidentally, I had the most progress in my acting career. As well. So I was acting in local film and television and international projects that were filmed there. I was appearing in English language LGBTQ media, and I was also freelancing for English language mainstream media in print and on television.
Wow.
At which time, through a rare slip in my safer sex behavior, I became HIV positive in August of 2007. And I've never been able to actually tell that part of my story at the end of all of the foundational information we've already talked about. So it will make a lot more sense to people in this particular revelation of that information if they've watched this interview up to this point, that even though I had the ability to protect myself and had practiced safer sex for decades, I can see in retrospect that my decision to practice unsafe sex was based upon isolation, loneliness, and depression, and feeling apart from and lesser than. I know that now. But because I am who I am, I decided to embark on a journey to go public with my status, because I had the visibility that I had. So, and then when I shared with a particular activist friend in Thailand that I was going to do that, he thought that it was a terrible idea. And he, I think, believed that I was looking to exploit HIV for my own fame and fortune. Which led me to realize that a lot of people that I thought would be advocates and allies were not going to be.
Right.
And I needed to do a deep dive and to look at my own motivations and to document them. So I began to write a blog for myself to keep empowering myself in this process that I was going to embark on about coming out HIV positive. So, do you mind if I read the back jacket of this?
No, please, go ahead.
So ultimately, that blog became a book. And this is the back of the book, written by a friend of mine who helped me edit the book. In Bangkok, Thailand, Hollywood's primo promo homo on the go-go, Nicholas Snow, is eking out a modest living as a foreign correspondent, actor, and media personality when, in a moment of personal desperation, he makes a decision that changes his life forever. Decades into the AIDS pandemic and completely armed with the knowledge to protect himself, During a moment of passion with a man who is unaware of having HIV, Nicholas has a rare slip in his safer sex behavior and becomes HIV positive.
Wow.
What might have been the end of a lifetime of dreams turns out to be only the beginning of a remarkable journey that Nicholas himself chronicles in real time as he is living it. Part 12-step program, 4th-step inventory, part reality show on paper. This is the painful yet triumphant saga of how Nicholas Snow uses his own mistake as an opportunity to empower millions of people throughout the world by disclosing not only his HIV status, but his experience, strength, and hope as well. From Hollywood to Bangkok to Bali and beyond, including Kuala Lumpur and Palm Springs, with profound expansion to Singapore, Mumbai, and throughout all of Asia, and ultimately in 21 languages across the globe, Life Positive, A Journey to the Center of My Heart, could easily be titled Eat, Pray, Disclose.
Nice.
And then Alina Oswald reviewed the book when it came out, and she said, "What stands out is that Life Positive is not only a story about living as an HIV positive individual, but also about living a positive life and living in the moment. Because, as the author explains, at least for the moment, compared to his life, which has gotten so big, HIV seems rather tiny."
Wow. I'll have to put a link to the book. Before you continue, before we move too much from what you were talking about, there is a question on the board for you, and I want to make sure we get it to you. What exposure or networking opened the door for you to working red carpet events, moderating huge events, etc.?
Well, the power of celebrity is very significant. And I'm not saying that I'm a celebrity, but if I'm photographed with many celebrities, then that rubs off on me. Uh, if I'm an if I am an actual journalist and I have the ability to document that and qualify for the credentialing process that takes place, that gives me credibility. And then, of course, if I'm doing this over time, that also gives me credibility. Uh, if you encapsulate my experience in Thailand alone, that was huge. I mean, it was really amazing to be able to step into Thailand at that level. And I have met members of the royal family. I ended up becoming one of the most openly HIV positive people in Asia. And I ended up creating a music video campaign of a song that I wrote. And it was produced by huge award-winning friend and producer in Thailand, Bruno Brugnano. It's called The Power to Be Strong. That was aired on national television in Thailand as part of a telethon for the Thai AIDS Red Cross, the Thai Red Cross AIDS outreach division, and attended by one of the royal family, and Her Royal Highness is one of the major patrons of that organization. So, but more importantly, I'd like to just step back and thank you for your question. I think anytime we are willing to express our truth, we're going to have powerful connections as a result of it. And my expressions might periodically take me to a red carpet, but I would say to anybody watching, anytime you decide to express your truth, it's going to create powerful circumstances for you and others.
And one of the things, I'm going to go back to something you said because we're getting close to the 45-minute mark, but the using your life and people saying, well, you're exploiting, because I'm now 21 years. I just celebrated 21 years positive in September. But I decided early on, once I started to get, this is in South Texas, noticed that people were calling on me because not a lot of Latinos were out there talking about HIV and AIDS, and people knew who I was, and they were starting to call on me, and then they started offering conference and keynote speaker opportunities, and then I heard from somebody else, and they were like, I get paid to speak about my life. And I was like, what? You mean I can make a career out of something that could be a tragedy? And I talked to my other personality, the one, I split everybody up, and I talked to HIV, and I said, okay, dude, you're going to live in my body forever. You're paying rent. We're making a career out of it. We're not we're not going to be a victim to it. We're going to be a success story, and we're going to survive this. And
You're
you're
paying
right.
rent.
Yeah, once you and I did that to cancer, and I've done that to my ostomy and my recovery. Like, hey, if you're going to be part of my life, you're paying rent. We're going to use you for something. And and another thing that I admire about you, and kind of similar, is taking the opportunities. It's like you meet somebody and they push you in a door, and you're like, okay, let's open that door. Let's see what's behind there. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. I mean, I'm sure between you and I, we could talk hours about projects or programs or things that just didn't fly the way we wanted them to. But for every failure, there's always a success story. And that's one thing I admire about your story, is that you've taken every opportunity to just grow a little bit. Does that make sense?
Well, thank you for that. And one of the things I do want to point out is there was a moment in time where being diagnosed as HIV positive was a tragedy in that moment because of what it meant at that time. But today, living with HIV is incidental if you know your HIV status and you have access to care. As a person living with HIV who is undetectable because of antiviral medication, I cannot scientifically transmit HIV to someone else. I know my status, I'm in treatment, I have an undetectable viral load, and I cannot transmit HIV. And for someone else that goes out and gets an HIV test and finds out they are still negative, they can increase their adherence to safer sex practices, and they can go on something that's called PrEP, pre-exposure prophylaxis, which is a 1 pill a day regime. And within 2 weeks of being on PrEP, that person is scientifically protected from being able to become HIV positive. So the telling of our stories, the way that you and I both do, and the transmission, no pun intended, of this information to people that need it, is the key to bringing about the end of the AIDS epidemic. And we started the conversation with privilege. Let's not forget that still barriers to care are based on privilege. And there are lots of people that have more challenging times getting access to testing, to treatment, to STI and STD services across the board, depending upon which community, which intersectionalities make up who you are, and which part of the world you live in. So there's so many complexities, but the solution starts by the expression of our truth.
Yeah. So if you want more information, just head over to hiv.gov, not com.gov, and look up information. We're
Just
getting
very,
them.
just
Sorry.
very, very quickly, I returned to Palm Springs in 2010, which was 3 years after I had become HIV positive. At the time, the science wasn't putting people who were HIV positive on antiretroviral medications right away. They didn't know about undetectable equals untransmittable. They didn't know that the HIV medication was in fact presenting the spread of HIV. So I didn't go on HIV meds until 2010 when my viral load dropped below 500. But I didn't have health insurance. I was living on the edge in Thailand, and I returned to Palm Springs to put together a firm foundation for my future. And one of the reasons I chose Palm Springs is because I knew about Desert AIDS Project, which has since become DAP Health. I had a sofa I could sleep on if I needed it, because I returned and I was on the edge of homelessness. I had no health care. I had no money. I was in a very scary situation. Everything that I owned was in a storage unit, and I had really put everything I had on the line to try to make a difference, but I needed to pull back and somehow build my life back together.
Right.
And so uh, I'm coming to you live from an affordable housing unit in the complex associated with DAP Health. I've lived in the complex for 10 years. My first year after living in the complex in a different apartment, I launched a podcast that became very successful over a 4-year period. And then I was inspired. I thought, aha, I can put everything I've ever done under the banner of promohomo.tv. So that's when I created the Promo Homo TV brand about 5 years ago. And it became a very powerful umbrella in which I could continue to do everything that I do. And that was the only kind of missing connection that we hadn't gotten to in our conversation that brings us full circle from basically my college experience, which we started out with, to right now. And that's how I put it together, Daniel.
It's awesome. Well, we got to the point now where I asked my guest to share some words of wisdom with the audience. So, Nicholas, now, what words of wisdom would you like to share?
You are not alone. You know, I experience anxiety still to this day. I'm afraid when I go out in a crowd, still to this day. As much as I have intellectual reasons to know that it's not true, emotionally, I can feel less than or not enough. It's challenging for me to connect authentically with other human beings. I'm working on it. Uh, I, uh, oh, interestingly, I just learned this morning that I had COVID in December.
Oh,
I know. It's like I just learned that this morning because I was talking about telling the truth. So I posted about this. I posted about this on Facebook this morning. It would just be much easier for me to look it up and read what I posted uh, rather than just sort of tell it to you narratively. So I had a I got the result this morning about December. So the type of test that I had was actually looking for antibodies. Well, I can't find that, but anyway, I had a oh, here it is. Forgive me. Here it is. Just a second. So all right, here's what I learned, and I'll put it over here so I can look at the camera. Um, when I had so that cold in December must have been COVID. When I had my cold in December, I wondered, how do I know the difference between a mild cold and Omicron? I also asked myself, how did I get a cold without getting COVID? I isolated and masked and all that stuff, but because I was going to Arizona for Christmas, I wanted to get a COVID test, which I did. A rapid test, which was negative, which simply told me I did not have COVID at the time. It wasn't an antibody test. Then I went to Arizona and made the decision as a fully vaccinated and boosted person to go with the flow with my extended unmasked family and in Walmart and all over the place at overlapping parties and events with 40 to 50 people and in Walmart, restaurants, everywhere else. It was like COVID didn't exist there, although employees at Starbucks and Walmart were required to wear masks. Late in my Arizona holiday, I got together with a good friend who does believe in COVID. I let her know in advance the personal risk I was taking, and when we met, we were masked and outdoors, except when eating. When I came back from Arizona, my assumption would be that I would have Omicron. I isolated for 3 days and then had a PCR test, which I scheduled before I went to Arizona. I had the test on December 29th, and a negative result came back on New Year's Eve. So I've been perplexed, wondering, how many vaccinated, boosted, and mostly masked people I know were getting COVID, and I wasn't. I kept returning to the question: was that cold I had in December really Omicron? So I asked my doctor to include in my lab orders for my upcoming visit the blood test that looks for COVID antibodies, and I got those results this morning. I had the blood drawn yesterday. It's positive. The only time I've been sick during the pandemic was in December. I did not lose my sense of taste or smell. My cough was not dry and was rather mild, and I had no gastrointestinal symptoms, just low energy with a mild cold for over a week, which leaves me with three thoughts. One, if I actually had COVID in the midst of precautions, which went undetected by a rapid test and a PCR test, because I was no longer infectious, that's why I would be negative on those tests, then many, many more people must have had COVID that are not part of the official reporting. 2, I believe the reason I did not get COVID in Arizona is because I'd already had it. And I'm very glad that I thought to bookend my trip with COVID tests, negative before going and negative before coming back. And finally, I find myself quite relieved that I know the answer to what will happen if I get COVID. So I was shocked by that information. But what led me into talking about that in my answer to your question is tell the truth, let it be of benefit to others,
Yeah,
and be engaged with the conversations that come out of it and keep hope alive.
there you go. Thank you. Yeah, well, statistics show that by the end of this year, we've all going to get one version or other. So I feel like just take a deep breath, do whatever the best you can, and move forward. We can't isolate from the world forever. We're gonna have to. I know people hate the term new normal, but whatever the new normal is for you, and um, in the I won't let things beat me. Like I can't let my anxiety and my uh, phobias beat me out and keep me from doing what I like to do. And it's going out and meeting people and networking when I have to, going to a conference. I'll be in San Antonio for a conference at the end of the month. And although it does come with a little bit of anxiety and stress, it is also very important for me to go talk about anal cancer. And that I'm sure you understand that the putting out the information beats out my fears sometimes. Like I, there is, I don't know if this makes sense to you. It's gone from I want to be on camera to I need to share information. Like this is part of my daily, and I need to do that. Does that make sense?
It makes complete sense. So I'm going to be very promo homo. If someone's watched this interview to this point, they must really be engaged. So I just want to say that I've launched a voluntary paid subscription to Promo Homo TV for $10 a month. Uh, and anyone that subscribes to my network between now and April 24th is going to be invited to my 60th birthday party subscriber thank you event at a nice restaurant here in Palm Springs. And if people happen to subscribe from anywhere in the world and they can't be at that event, they're going to be given a voluntary optional opportunity to be connected into a live broadcast that comes from the event. But that allows me to continue to give the gift of Promo Homo TV to the world. So I invite that support, but I'm really grateful to you and to all that you do, and for you giving me the platform to have this wide-reaching conversation about the way that I'm living my life, hopefully to make a difference. But what I love most about our conversation is that how much you and I have in common.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you again for everybody who's watching. Nicholas Snow with Promo Homo. Make sure you go to the website. All the information is there, right, for the event, so they can go.
Yes, and this episode at the time of the broadcast is right on the cover of my website as well.
So go check it out. You'll get information on there. We're definitely going to subscribe. So for everybody out there, subscribe. Go check it out. We have to meet in person and have a meal and talk more.
Yeah, just to put it out there, I think you and I spoke on a dating app before when we were still both single.
Yeah.
We never met, and then now you've been with someone for 10 years. So whatever you happen to have learned that allowed you to find someone, I'd like to talk to you more about that.
We're gonna invite you to some tacos and
that sounds great.
For everybody watching, before we go, I want to remind y'all that here at Little Mexican Productions Inc., we've got 3 shows on the air. Check us out on Wednesdays with the Christian and Daniel Show at 6 p.m. Pacific, 9 Eastern. The Car Devo on Fridays at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 o'clock Eastern. And put together on Saturdays at noon and 3 Eastern. Today, if you're watching this live, we are having an extra show this Saturday. Actor and singer Ray Buffer will be on the show talking about his career and his path. Make sure you check us out at littlemexicanproductions.com and hashtag Little Mexican Productions Inc. So go check us out. We're going to have there's more stuff coming for you guys. We're working on more stuff. Christian and I just had our photo shoot, so we'll be showing those pictures at the next show. Plus, we've got more guests coming up. And if you would like to be a guest on Put It Together or be a co-host on the Christian and Danny Show, please send us a message, whatever channel you're watching on, either Facebook, LinkedIn, or Twitter, or on YouTube. And just send us a message saying, hey, I want to be a guest or I want to be a co-host. And we would love to have you on. If you're watching on any of those channels, please do us a favor. You mind sharing those so other people can watch it. And if you're watching on YouTube, scroll down, hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. It'll let you know every time there's a new show popping up. On Mondays we have the horoscopes, so don't miss those on every Monday morning, my weekly horoscopes. For now, Nicholas, thank you so much. I so appreciate you. This was such a great conversation. We'll have to chat again.
Thank you. I think I've said things to you I haven't ever said anywhere, so congratulations on that.
That's the magic of the show. I'm going to put you
Yes,
in the
exactly.
Don't go anywhere. I'll be right back for you. For everybody watching, thank you so much for being here. I hope you enjoyed the show. If you have any questions after the show, be sure to send them in. I will make sure we get them over to Nicholas, make sure he answers them for you. For now, I want to thank all y'all for watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.